Yo, hello, test. Testing. Hello. Can I hear myself? Yes, I can. Dope, cool. Okay. All right. Is the I think the music might be a little bit too loud. I think that's fine, maybe. Here, let me... Testing. Hello. Alright, well, we'll see. Okay. I should really get some coffee for this. Chapter 1. Organizing Chaos. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of. Cool. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. Our invisible governors are, in many cases, unaware of the identity of their fellow members in the inner cabinet. They govern us by their qualities of natural leadership, their ability to supply needed ideas, and by their key position in the social structure. Whatever attitude one chooses to take towards this condition, it remains a fact that in every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by a relatively small number of persons, a trifling fraction of our 120 million. Wow, 100 years ago, our population was like 1/3 of what it is right now. That's fucking crazy. A trifling fraction of our 120 million who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind, who harness old social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world. It is not usually realized how necessary these invisible governors are to the orderly functioning of our group life. In theory, every citizen may vote for whom he pleases. Our Constitution does not envisage political parties as a part of the mechanism of government, and its framers seem not to have pictured to themselves the existence in our national politics of anything like the modern political machine. But the American voters soon found that without organization and direction, their individual votes, cast perhaps for dozens or hundreds of candidates, would produce nothing but confusion. Yeah, so I understand that the framers of the Constitution were not very big fans of political parties. Shit changes, though. But the American voters soon found that without organization and direction, their individual votes, cast perhaps for dozens or hundreds of candidates, would produce nothing but confusion. Yeah, this is why political parties formed. It's to consolidate specific conglomerates of ideas. Invisible government, in the shape of rudimentary political parties, arose almost overnight. Ever since then, we have agreed, for the sake of simplicity and practicality, that party machines should narrow down the field of choice to 2 candidates or at most 3 or 4. In theory, every citizen makes up his mind on the public questions and matters of private conduct. In theory, every citizen makes up his mind on public questions and matters of private conduct. In practice, if all men had to study for themselves the abstruse economic, political, and ethical data involved in every question, they would find it impossible to come to a conclusion about anything. We have to this is a whole thing. If all men had to study for themselves the abstruse economic, political, and ethical data involved in every question, they would find it impossible to come to a conclusion about anything. This is the problem with the people that say, do your own research. You could read hundreds of reports every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the entirety of your human existence and not have a fraction of the information that you need in order to make decisions on the scale of governing 330 million people. That's why we have organizations of people that work for individual projects. And that's also why populism is so stupid. It's like you expect the population to have what's best in their mind for each individual thing going on, or for them to understand how mechanisms of government should work, when the only thing that they're going to be actually generally acquainted with is their own daily lives, which is like, what does anyone's daily life have to do with like tactical, logistical deployments of ships or like global trade or anything? Like, people just don't understand. We have voluntarily agreed to let an invisible government sift the data and high spot the outstanding issues so that our field of choice shall be narrowed to practical proportions. This is saying we have decided to allow people to package information and deploy it to us in digestible bits. From our leaders and the media they use to reach the public, we accept the evidence and the demarcation of issues bearing upon public questions. From some ethical teacher, be it a minister, a favorite essayist, or merely prevailing opinion, we accept a standardized code of social conduct to which we conform most of the time. In theory, everybody buys the best and cheapest commodities offered him on the market. In practice, if everyone went around pricing and chemically testing before purchasing the dozens of soaps or fabrics or brands of bread which are for sale, economic life would become hopelessly jammed. To avoid such confusion, society consents to have its choice narrowed to ideas and objects brought to its attention through propaganda of all kinds. There is consequently a vast and continuous effort going on to capture our minds in the interest of some policy or commodity or idea. It might be better to have, instead of propaganda and special pleading, committees of wise men who would choose our rulers, dictate our conduct, private and public, and decide upon the best types of clothes for us to wear and the best kinds of food for us to eat. But we have chosen the opposite method, that of open competition. Theoretically, yeah, okay? I don't think this is an advocation for a planned economy. I don't think, but we'll see. We must find a way to make free competition function with reasonable smoothness. To achieve this, society has consented to permit free competition to be organized by leadership and propaganda. Some of the phenomena of this process are criticized: the manipulation of news, the inflation of personality, the general ballyhoo by which politicians and commercial products and social ideas are brought to the consciousness of the masses. The instruments by which public opinion is organized and focused may be misused, but organization and focusing are necessary to orderly life. As civilization has become more complex, and as the need for invisible government has been increasingly demonstrated, the technical means have been invented and developed by which opinion may be regimented. With the printing press and the newspaper, the railroad, the telephone, telegraph, radio, and airplanes, ideas can be spread rapidly and even instantaneously over the whole of America. Just to remind, this is from 1928. So this sentence right here is like, no one would ever have thought of something like the internet being like a method of information transfer, and they're already having issues. H.G. Wells senses the vast potentialities of these inventions when he writes in the New York Times: modern means of communication, the power afforded by print, telephone, wireless, and so forth, of rapidly putting through directive, strategic, or technical conceptions to a great number of cooperating centers. This is how they spelled cooperating back in the 20s. That's crazy. Conceptions to a great number of cooperating centers of getting quick replies and effective discussions have opened up a new world of political processes. Ideas and phrases can now be given an effectiveness greater than the greater than the effectiveness of any personality and stronger than any sectional interest. The common design can be documented and sustained against perversion and betrayal. It can be elaborated and developed steadily and widely without personal, local, and sectional misunderstanding. What Mr. Wells says of political processes is equally true of commercial and social processes and all manifestations of mass activity. The groupings and affiliations of society today are no longer subject to local and sectional limitations. When the Constitution was adopted, the unit of organization was the village community, which produced the greater part of its own necessary commodities and generated its group ideas and opinions by personal contact and discussion directly among its citizens. But today, because ideas can be instantaneously transmitted to any distance and to any number of people, this geographical integration has been supplemented by many other kinds of grouping, so that persons having the same ideas and interests may be associated and regimented for common action, even though they live thousands of miles apart. This is so crazy to read. The fact that they were talking about this in the 20s, the 1920s. It's just like the entire strategy of political information, or even like he's saying, like commercial, like the way that you can contact thousands of people from thousands of miles away. It's extremely difficult to realize how many and diverse are these cleavages in our society. They may be social, political, economic, racial, religious, or ethical, with hundreds of subdivisions of each. In the World Almanac, for example, the following groups are listed under the A's. Oh God. I hope that we don't get into some crazy, weird, like, Darwinist, anthropological, weird, racist shit. But, I mean, it is the 1920s. Who knows what's going to be listed in this essay or whatever it is. The League to Abolish Capital Punishment, Association to Abolish War, American Institute of Accountants, Actors Equity Association, Actuarial Association of America, International Advertising Association, National Aeronautic Association, Albany Institute of Art, History and Art, the Amen Corner, American Academy in Rome, American Antiquarian Society, League for American Citizenship, American Federation of Labor, AMORC, Rosicrucian Order, Andoring Club, American Irish Historical Association, Anti-Cigarette League, Anti-Profanity League, Archaeological Association of America, National Archery Association, Singing Society, American Astronomical Association, Ayrshire Breeders Association, Aztec Club of 1847. There are many more under the A section of this very limited list. What? Okay. The American Newspaper Annual and Directory for 1928 lists 22,128 periodical publications in America. I have selected at random the ends published in Chicago. I guess this is just displaying the amount of information that can be distributed now due to broadcasts and newspapers. Yeah. I'm not going to read all of these. The circulation of some of these publications is astonishing. The National Livestock Producer has a sworn circulation of 155,978. The National Engineer of 20,328. The New World, an estimated circulation of 67,000. The greater number of the periodicals listed, chosen at random from among 22,128, have a circulation in excess of 10,000. You look at these numbers and it sounds like, he's astonished. It's crazy that these numbers exist. But like having 150,000 subscribers on YouTube nowadays is like not even that much in the grand scheme of things. Like people have hundreds of thousands in like the first year of their career, and they'll boost up to millions and millions, which is insane. It just goes to show. The diversity of these publications is evident at a glance, yet they can only faintly suggest the multitude of cleavages which exist in our society. He's saying that like subcultures and subdivisions of people's interests are everywhere, and we really have no idea how many groups exist. And along which flow information and opinion carrying authority to the individual groups. Here are the conventions scheduled for Cleveland, Ohio, recorded in a single recent issue of World Convention Senvention dates. I don't know what this word means. A fraction of the 5,500 conventions, and rallies scheduled. Okay, cool. I'm glad whatever. The Employing Photo Engravers Association of, this is another massive list of random shit. Other conventions, Pickle Packers Association. If all of these thousands of formal organizations and institutions could be listed, no complete list has ever been made. They would still represent but a part of those existing less formally but leading vigorous lives. Ideas are sifted and opinions stereotyped in the neighborhood bridge club. Leaders assert their authority through community drives and amateur theatricals. Thousands of women may unconsciously belong to a sorority which follows the fashion set by a single society leader. Life satirically expresses this idea in the reply which it represents an American as given to the starting that sentence over. Life satirically expresses this idea in the reply which it represents an American as given to the Britisher who praises this country for having no upper and lower classes or castes. Yeah, all we have is the 400, the white-collar men, bootleggers, Wall Street barons, criminals, the DAR, the KKK, the colonial dames, the Masons, the Kiwanis, and Rotarians, the K of the C, the K of C, the Elks, the Censors, this is like another just social classes, I guess. The Elks, the Censors, the Cognoscenti, the Morons, heroes like Lindy, the WCTU, politicians, the Menconites, the Boise, immigrants, broadcasters, the rich and the poor. Yet, it must be remembered that these thousands of groups interlace. John Jones, besides being a Rotarian, is a member of a church, a fraternal order, of a political party. Of a charitable organization, of a professional association, of a local chamber of commerce, of a league for or against prohibition, or of a society a local chamber of commerce, of a league for or against prohibition, or of a society for or against lowering the tariff, and a golf club. The opinions which he receives as a Rotarian, he will tend to disseminate in the other groups in which he may have influence. This invisible intertwining structure of groupings and associations is the mechanism by which democracy has organized its group mind and simplified its mass thinking. To deplore the existence of such a mechanism is to ask for society such as never was and never will be. To admit that it exists, but expect that it shall not be used, is unreasonable. Emil Ludwig represents Napoleon as ever on the watch for indications of public opinion, always listening to the voice of the people, a voice which defies calculation. Do you know, he said in those days, what amazes me more than all else? The impotence of force to organize anything. It is the purpose of this book to explain the structure of the mechanism which controls the public mind, and to tell how it is manipulated by the special pleader who seeks to create public acceptance for a particular idea or commodity. It will attempt at the same time to find the due place in the modern democratic scheme for this new propaganda and to suggest its gradually evolving code of ethics and practice. All right. Chapter 2, The New Propaganda. In the days when kings were kings, Louis XIV made his modest remark, L'état c'est moi. I have no idea. He was nearly right, but times have changed. The steam engine, the multiple press, and the public school, that trio of the Industrial Revolution, have taken the power away from kings and given it to the people. The people actually gained power, which the king lost. For economic power tends to draw after it political power. And the history of the Industrial Revolution shows that power passed from the king and the aristocracy to the bourgeoisie. Universal suffrage and universal schooling reinforced this tendency, and at last even the bourgeoisie stood in fear of the common people, for the masses promised to become king. Today, however, a reaction has set in. The minority has discovered a powerful help in influencing majorities. It has been found possible so to mold the mind of the masses that will throw their newly gained strength in the desired direction. In the present structure of society, this practice is inevitable. Whatever of social importance is done today, whether in politics, finance, manufacture, agriculture, charity, education, or other fields, must be done with the help of propaganda. So just to kind of break that sentence down a little bit, whatever of social importance is done must be done with the help of propaganda. It's essentially saying that people are going to select ideas that align with their desires and then push those problems as being of more social importance than anything else that other people are trying to push. So it's like this kind of concept of the war for attention, kind of like if you are part of a social group that has a specific desire, you're going to have to get people to agree with that. You're going to have to get people to agree with you that this thing is important, and the best way that you can get people to agree with you that something is important is by making them believe that it's the most important thing. So it leads to this like over exaggeration. Yeah. Propaganda is the executive arm of the invisible government. Universal literacy was supposed to educate the common man to control his environment. Once he could read and write, he would have a mind fit to rule. So ran the democratic doctrine. This is what people thought about smartphones. Okay, so like we can just kind of like adopt this little sentiment into modern times by saying universal access to information through the internet was supposed to educate the common man to control his environment. So once he could read and write anything, essentially any information that he could possibly ever want to access, he would have a mind fit to rule. So it's like saying that like, oh, everyone's going to be so smart when we have, encyclopedias at the hand in our hands at every minute of every day. But here we go. But instead of a mind, universal literacy has given him rubber stamps inked with advertising slogans, with editorials, with published scientific data, with the trivialities of the tabloids and the platitudes of history, but quite innocent of original thought. Yeah. Each man's rubber stamps are the duplicates of millions of others, so that when those millions are exposed to the same stimuli, all receive identical imprints. It may seem an exaggeration to say that the American public gets most of its ideas in this wholesale fashion. The mechanism by which ideas are disseminated on a large scale is propaganda, in the broad sense of an organized effort to spread a particular belief or doctrine. Yeah, here we go. I am aware that the word propaganda carries to many minds an unpleasant connotation. Yet whether, in any instance, propaganda is good or bad depends upon the merit of the cause urged and the correctness of the information published. In itself, the word propaganda has certain technical meanings, which, like most things in the world, are neither good nor bad, but custom makes them so. I find the word defined in Funk and Wagnall's dictionary in 4 ways. This is a great dictionary name. We should get this back. Webster's Oxford, nah. I would get my definitions from Funk and Wagnall. That's that shit for real. A society of cardinals, the overseers of foreign missions, also the College of Propaganda at Rome, founded by Pope Urban VIII in 1627 for the education of missionary priests. Hence, any institution or scheme for propagating a doctrine or system. Effort directed systematically toward the gaining of public support for an opinion or a course of action. The principles advanced by propaganda. The Scientific American, in a recent issue, pleads for the restoration to respectable usage of that fine word, propaganda. There is no word in the English language, it says, whose meaning has been so sadly distorted as the word propaganda. Just remember, this is from 100 years ago. This is already like a problem. Okay. Fuck. Okay. The change took place mainly during the late war when the term took on a decidedly sinister complexion. Complexion? Words are spelled different 100 years ago, alright? You're gonna have to fucking plead, or you're gonna have to bear with me, okay? If you turn to the Standard Dictionary, you will find that the word was applied to a congregation or society of cardinals for the care and oversight of foreign missions, which it was instituted at Rome in the year of 1627. Okay. It was applied also to the College of Propaganda at Rome that was founded by Pope Urban VIII for the education of missionary priests. Hence, in later years, the word came to be applied to any institution or scheme for propagating a doctrine or system. Judged by this definition, we can see that in its true sense, propaganda is a perfectly legitimate form of human activity. Any society, whether it be social, religious, or political, which is possessed of certain beliefs and sets out to make them known, either by spoken or written words, is practicing propaganda. Truth is mighty and must prevail, and if any body of men believes that they have discovered a valuable truth, it is not merely their privilege but their duty to disseminate that truth. If they realize as they quickly must, If they realize, as they quickly must, that this spreading of the truth can be done upon a large scale and effectively only by organized effort, they will make use of the press and that platform as the best means to give it wide circulation. Propaganda becomes vicious and reprehensible only when its authors consciously and deliberately disseminate what they know to be lies, or when they aim at effects which they know to be prejudicial to the common good. Propaganda, in its proper meaning, is a perfectly wholesome word of honest parentage, with an honorable history. The fact that it should, today, be carrying a sinister meaning merely shows how much of the child remains in the average adult. So I guess this is like delineating what we would call like marketing or messaging, because like when you have a piece of information that you want people to know, it's important for you to market your ideas to the public so that they can consume that information and be informed. But I guess that all of that would have been blanketed or umbrella termed with propaganda back before, I guess, the First World War. And after the First World War is when the word propaganda started having a negative connotation. Okay. A group of citizens writes and talks in favor of a certain course of action in some debatable question, believing that it is promoting the best interest of the community. Propaganda? Not a bit of it. Just a plain, forceful statement of truth. But let another group of citizens express opposing views, and they are promptly labeled with the sinister name of propaganda. What is sauce? What is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, says a wise old proverb. Let us make haste to put this fine old word back where it belongs and restore its dignified significance for the use of our children and our children's children's children. The extent to which propaganda shapes the progress of affairs about us may surprise even well-informed persons. Nevertheless, it is only necessary to look under the surface of the newspaper for a hint as to propaganda's authority over public opinion. Page 1 of the New York Times on the day these Page 1 of the New York Times on the day these paragraphs are written contains 8 important news stories. 4 of them, or one half, are propaganda. The casual reader accepts them as accounts of spontaneous happenings, but are they? Here are the headlines which announce them. 12 nations warn China real reform must come before they give relief. Pritchett reports Zionism will fail. Reality men demand a transit inquiry, and our living standard highest in history, says Hoover report. Okay, so I guess he's going to analyze each one of these headlines. I'm going to get a drink real quick. All right, I'm back. Take them in order. The article on China explains the joint report of the Commission on Extraterritorial. The Commission on Extraterritorial. Take 3. Take them in order. The article on China explains the report of the Commission on Extraterritoriality in China, presenting an exposition of the powers stand in the Chinese muddle. What it says is less important than what it is. It was made public by State Department today, with the purpose of presenting to the American public a picture of the State Department's position. Its source gives it authority, and the American public tends to accept and support the State Department's view. The report of Dr. Pritchett, a trustee of the Carnegie Foundation for International Peace, is an attempt to find the facts about this Jewish colony in the midst of a restless Arab world. Wow, it's crazy how 100 years ago bro, 100 years ago, and this is what just today is still in the news. Like, God. Okay. An attempt to find the facts about this Jewish colony in the midst of a restless Arab world. When Dr. Pritchett's survey convinced him that in the long run Zionism would bring more bitterness and more unhappiness both for the Jew and for the Arab, this point of view was broadcast with all the authority of the Carnegie Foundation, so that the public would hear and believe. The statement by the president of the Real Estate Board of New York and Secretary Hoover's report are similar attempts to influence the public towards an opinion. These examples are not given to create the impression that there is anything sinister about the propaganda. They are set down rather to illustrate how conscious direction is given to events and how the men behind these events influence public opinion. As such, they are examples of modern propaganda. At this point, we may attempt to define propaganda. Modern propaganda is a consistent, enduring effort. Sorry, let me start that over again. Modern propaganda is a consistent, enduring effort to create or shape events to influence the relations of the public to an enterprise, idea, or group. This practice of creating circumstances and of creating pictures in the minds of millions of persons is very common. Virtually no important undertaking is now carried on without it, whether that enterprise be building a cathedral, endowing a university, marketing a moving picture. I guess that's what they called it back in the day. Floating a large bond issue or electing a president. Sometimes the effect on the public is created by a professional propagandist, sometimes by an amateur deputed for the job. The important thing is that it is universal and continuous, and in its sum total, it is regimenting the public mind every bit as much as an army regiments the bodies of its soldiers. So vast are the numbers of minds which can be regimented, and so tenacious are they when regimented, that a group at times offers an irresistible pressure before which legislators, editors, and teachers are helpless. The group will cling to its stereotype, as Walter Lippmann calls it, making of those supposedly powerful beings the leaders of public opinion, mere bits of driftwood in the surf. Okay, 1 second. We're going to reread that last sentence. The group will cling to its stereotype, as Walter Lippmann calls it, making of those supposedly powerful beings the leaders of public opinion, mere bits of driftwood in the surf. So it's pretty much saying that the group will take over control of the narrative. To coalesce with their stereotypes, making legislators, editors, teachers helpless in their efforts to steer them away from that stereotype, I guess. Making the powerful beings the leaders of public opinion mere bits of driftwood in the surf. Yeah, so it's pretty much saying that like these powerful leaders of public opinion can be cast aside by the group. When an imperial wizard sensing that When an imperial wizard, sensing what is perhaps hunger for an ideal, offers a picture of a nation all Nordic and nationalistic. Commas, brother. Jesus. So, an imperial wizard, sensing what is perhaps hunger for an ideal, offers a picture of a nation all Nordic and nationalistic. The common man of the older American stock, feeling himself elbowed out of his rightful position and prosperity by the newer immigrant stock, grasps the picture, which fits in so neatly with his prejudices and makes it his own. Wow. So we're talking about... I don't know what an imperial wizard is, but it sounds as if some established group when an established group is, this is some Nazi shit, yeah? Offers a picture of a nation all Nordic and nationalistic. The common man of the older American stock, feeling elbowed out of his rightful position of and prosperity by the newer immigrant stock, grasps the picture with which fits in so neatly with his prejudices and makes it his own. He buys the sheet and pillowcase. Oh, this is literally about the KKK. Okay. He buys the sheet and pillowcase costume and bands with his fellows by the thousands into a huge group powerful enough to swing state elections and to throw a ponderous monkey wrench into a national convention. Wow. Okay. Oh, okay. That's what an imperial wizard is. Yeah, the wizard of the fucking KKK. My bad. I wasn't making that connection yet. I had to read way further down. But yes, okay, yes. I know that they call them wizards in that fucking group. Okay, yeah. In our present social organization, approval of the public is essential to any large undertaking. Hence, a laudable movement may be lost unless it impresses itself on the public mind. Charity, as well as business and politics and literature for that matter, have had to adopt propaganda. For the public must be regimented into giving money just as it is to be just as it must be regimented into tuberculosis prophylaxis. I'm sorry. Reading things from 100 years ago is not the easiest thing I've ever done, but it's been going okay. It's been okay. The Near East Relief. The Association for the Improvement of the Conditions of the Poor of New York and all the rest have to work on public opinion just as though they had tubes of toothpaste to sell. We are proud of our diminishing infant death rate. And that too is the work of propaganda. Propaganda does exist on all sides of us, and it does change our mental pictures of the world. Even if this be unduly pessimistic, and that remains to be proved, the opinion reflects a tendency that is undoubtedly real. In fact, its use is growing as its efficiency. Its use is growing as its efficiency and gaining public support is recognized. Okay. This then evidently indicates that the fact that anyone with sufficient influence can lead sections of the public, at least for a time, and get for a given purpose. God, this is super fucking blackpilling. That these problems have been pointed out for over 100 years and we're still fucking with them. Oh, man. God, and it's even worse now because of the fucking internet. Oh. God damn it. I'm going to reread that last sentence. This then evidently indicates the fact that anyone with sufficient influence can lead sections of the public, at least for a time and for a given purpose. Formerly, the rulers were the leaders. They laid out the course of history by the simple process of doing what they wanted. And if nowadays the successors of the rulers, those whose position or ability gives them rise to power, can no longer do what they want without the approval of the masses, they find in propaganda a tool which is increasingly powerful in gaining that approval. Therefore, propaganda is here to stay. Right you were, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Edward Bernays. It was, of course, the astounding success of propaganda during the war that opened the eyes of the intelligent few in all departments of life to the possibilities of regimenting the public mind. The American government and numerous patriotic agencies developed a technique which, to most persons accustomed to bidding for public acceptance, was new. They not only appealed to the individual by means of every approach, visual, graphic, and auditory, to support the national endeavor, but they also secured the cooperation of key men in every group. Persons whose mere word carried authority to hundreds of thousands of followers. Now just update that with hundreds of millions, and then we're on track with what we're doing right now. They thus automatically gained the support of fraternal, religious, commercial, patriotic, social, and local groups whose members took their opinions from their accustomed leaders and spokesmen, or from the periodical publications which they were accustomed to read and believe. This is just social media. At the same time, the manipulators of patriotic opinion made use of the mental cliches and the emotional habits of the public to produce mass reactions against the alleged atrocities, the terror and tyranny of the enemy. Yeah. It was only natural, after the war ended, that intelligent persons should ask themselves whether it was not possible to apply a similar technique to the problems of peace. As a matter of fact, the practice of propaganda since the war has assumed very different forms from those prevalent 20 years ago. 1908 would have been World War I. This new technique may fairly be called the new propaganda. It takes account not merely of the individual, nor even of the mass mind alone, but also and especially of the anatomy of society, with its interlocking group formations and loyalties. It sees the individual not only as a cell in the social organism, but as a cell organized into the social unit. Touch a nerve at a sensitive spot, and you will get an automatic response from certain specific members of the organism. Business offers graphic examples. Business offers graphic examples of the effect that may be produced upon the public by interested groups, such as textile manufacturers losing their markets, Business offers graphic examples of this, of the effect that may be produced upon the public by interested groups, such as textile manufacturers losing their markets. This problem arose not long ago when the velvet manufacturers were facing ruin because their product had long been out of fashion. Analysis showed that it was impossible to revive a velvet fashion within America. Anatomical hunt for the vital spot, Paris, obviously, but yes and no. Okay, that's a sentence. Paris is the home of fashion. Lyons is the home of silk. The attack had to be made at the source. So what they're saying is, in order to revitalize the velvet fashion industry, they're going to go to Paris and make it a popular thing again, essentially, hopefully, maybe. Maybe I'm wrong. It was determined to substitute purpose for chance and to utilize the regular sources for fashion distribution and to influence the public from these sources. A velvet fashion service, openly supported by the manufacturers, was organized. Its first function was to establish contact with the Lyons manufactories and the Paris courtiers. couturiers. Couturiers? Yeah, sure. To discover what they were doing, to encourage them to act on behalf of Velvet, and to help in the proper exploitation of their wares. Yeah, so yeah, exactly what I said, I think. They're going to go to establish contact with Lyons, and then they're going to go to Paris couturiers. I'm assuming these are fashion designers. Or yeah. An intelligent Parisian was enlisted in the work. He visited Lanvin and Worth, Agnes and Patou, and others, and induced them to use velvet in their gowns and hats. Yeah. It was he who arranged for the distinguished countess this or duchess that to wear the hat or the gown. Honestly, this is way easier to read than I expected, but hey, you know what? I'll take it. As for the presentation of the idea to the public, the American buyer or the American woman of fashion was simply shown the velvet creations in the atelier of the dressmaker and the milliner. She bought the velvet because she liked it and because it was in fashion, but it was in fashion because they talked to the French people and the French people put it in their shit, and now these people like it. Yeah. The editors of the American magazines and fashion reporters of the American newspapers, likewise subjected to the actual, although created, circumstance, reflected it in their news, which in turn subjected the buyer and consumer here to the same influences. The result was that what was at first a trickle of velvet became a flood. A demand was slowly but deliberately created in Paris and America. A big department store aiming to be a style leader advertised velvet gowns and hats on the authority of the French couturiers, and quoted original cables received from them. Cables is like a telegram, I think. I think that's what they called it. The echo of the new style note was heard from hundreds of department stores throughout the country, which wanted to be style leaders too. Bulletins followed the dispatches. The mail followed the cables, and the American woman traveler appeared before the ship news photographers in velvet gown and hat. The created circumstances had their effect. Fickle fashion was veered to velvet, was one newspaper comment. And the industry in the United States again kept thousands busy. The new propaganda, having a regard to the constitution of society as a whole, not infrequently serves to focus and realize the desires of the masses. A desire for a specific reform, however widespread, cannot be translated into action until it is made articulate, and until it has exerted sufficient pressure upon the proper lawmaking bodies. Lawmaking bodies would just be like the tastemakers. Millions of housewives may feel that manufactured foods deleterious to health should be prohibited, but there's little chance that their individual desires will be translated into effective legal form unless their half-expressed demand can be organized, made vocal, and concentrated upon the state legislature or upon the federal Congress in some mode which will produce the results they desire. This is the importance of organization of ideas and implementation of effective strategies to get things heard and understood by people that actually have the power to change them. This is extremely important shit. This is why protests is 99% of the time completely fucking stupid, because they don't have an organized message, they don't have a direct line to people that can change shit, and then they just fuck things up for everybody. A lot of the time. I'm not saying that's always what happened, but it happens a lot. Whether they realize it or not, they call upon propaganda to organize and effectuate their demand. But clearly it is the intelligent minorities which need to make use of propaganda continuously and systematically. In the active proselytizing, yeah, sure, why not? Proselytizing minorities in whom selfish interests and public interests coincide. Sentence again. Let's do that one again. But clearly it is the intelligent minorities which need to make use of the propaganda continuously and systematically. In the active proselytizing minorities in whom selfish interests and public interests coincide lie the progress and development of America. Fuck. Okay, I really need to read that again. In the active proselytizing minorities and the active. Only through the active energy of the intelligent few can the public at large become aware of and act upon new ideas. So if there's like a intelligent few that come up with a good idea, the public can only become aware of and act upon that new idea by effective marketing and messaging, I guess. Small groups of persons can and do make the rest of us think what they please about a given subject. Small groups of persons can and do make the rest of us think what they please about a given subject, but there are usually proponents and opponents of every propaganda, both of whom are equally eager to convince the majority. Chapter 3. The New Propagandists. Who are the men who, without our realizing it, give us our ideas, tell us whom to admire and whom to despise, what to believe about the ownership of public utilities, about the tariff, about the price of rubber, about the Dawes Plan, about immigration, who tells us how our houses should be designed, what furniture we should put into them, what menus we should serve on our table, what kinds of shirts we must wear, what sports we should indulge in, what plays we should see, what charities we should support, what pictures we should admire, what slang we should affect, what jokes we should laugh at. Holy crap, dude. If we set out to make a list of the men and women who, because of their position in public life, might fairly be called the molders of public opinion, we could quickly arrive at an extended list of persons mentioned in Who's Who, which is like, I guess, like a Who's Who of Hollywood type of thing, like a fucking, probably like a magazine. It would obviously include the President of the United States and the members of his cabinet, the senators and representatives in Congress, the governors of our 48 states. Yeah, we're back then. We're back when we didn't even have 50 fucking states. The presidents of the chambers of commerce in our 100 largest cities, the chairman of the boards of directors of our 100 or more largest industrial corporations, the president of many of the labor unions affiliated in the American Federation of Labor, the national president of each of the national professional and fraternal organizations, the president of each of the racial or language societies in our country, the 100 leading newspaper and magazine editors, the 50 most popular authors, the presidents of the 50 leading charitable organizations, the 20 leading theatrical or cinema producers, the 100 recognized leaders of fashion, the most popular and influential clergymen in the 100 leading cities, the presidents of our colleges and universities, and the foremost members of their faculties, the most powerful financiers and Wall Street, the most noted amateurs of sport, and so on. Wow, yes, that was a page of that. Such a list would comprise several thousand persons, but it is well known that many of these leaders are themselves led, sometimes by persons whose names are known to few. Many a congressman, in framing his platform, follows the suggestions of a district boss whom few persons outside of the political machine have ever heard of. Eloquent divines may have great influence in their communities, but often take their doctrines from a higher ecclesiastical authority. The presidents of chambers of commerce mold the thought of local businessmen concerning public issues, but the opinions which they promulgate are usually derived from some national authority. A presidential candidate may be drafted in response to an overwhelming popular demand, but it is well known that his name may be decided upon by half a dozen men sitting around a table in a hotel room. In some instances, the power of the invisible wire pullers is flagrant. The power of the invisible cabinet, which deliberated at the poker table in a certain little greenhouse in Washington, has become a national legend. There was a period in which the major policies of the national government were dictated by a single man, Mark Hanna. A Simmons may, for many years, succeed in marshaling millions of men on a platform of intolerance and violence. Such persons typify in the public mind the type of ruler associated with the phrase invisible government. But we do not often stop to think that there are dictators in other fields whose influence is just as decisive as that of the politicians I have mentioned. And Irene Castle can establish the fashion of short hair, which dominates 9/10 of the women who made it. And Irene Castle can establish the fashion of short hair, which dominates 9/10 of the women who make any pretense to being fashionable. I'm guessing this is like an actress or something who people all copied her hairstyle. Paris fashion leaders set the mode of the short skirt, for wearing which... Holy shit. Paris fashion leaders set the mode of the short skirt, for wearing which 20 years ago any woman would simply have been arrested and thrown in jail by the New York police. And the entire women's clothing industry, capitalized at hundreds of millions of dollars, must be reorganized to conform to their dictum. Wow, Jesus. There are invisible rulers who control the destinies of millions. It is not generally realized to what extent the words and actions of our most influential public men are dictated by shrewd persons operating behind the scenes. Nor, what is still more important, the extent which our thoughts and habits are modified by authorities. In some departments of our daily life, in which we imagine ourselves free agents, we are ruled by dictators exercising great power. A man buying a suit of clothes imagines that he is choosing, according to his taste and personality, the kind of garment which he prefers. In reality, he may be obeying the orders of an anonymous gentleman tailor in London. This personage is the silent partner in a modest tailoring establishment, which is patronized by gentlemen of fashion and princes of the blood. He suggests to British noblemen and others a blue cloth instead of a grey, 2 buttons instead of 3, or sleeves a 1/4 of an inch narrower than last season. The distinguished customer approves of the idea. But how does this fact affect John Smith of Topeka? The gentleman tailor is under contract with a certain large American firm which manufactures men's suits to send them instantly to the designs of the suits chosen by the leaders of London fashion. Upon receiving the designs with specifications as to color, weight, and texture, the firm immediately places an order with the cloth makers for several $100,000 worth of cloth. The suits made up according to the specifications are then advertised as the latest fashion. The fashionable men in New York, Chicago, Boston, and Philadelphia wear them. And the Topeka man, recognizing this leadership, does the same. Women are just as subject to the commands of invisible government as are men. A silk manufacturer seeking a new market for its product suggested to a large manufacturer of shoes that women's shoes should be covered with silk to match their dresses. The idea was adopted and systematically propagandized. A popular actress was persuaded to wear the shoes, the fashion spread, the shoe firm was ready with the supply to meet the created demand. It's all marketing, brother. The silk company was ready with the silk for more shoes. Wild and out. The man who injected this idea into the shoe industry was ruling women in one department of their social lives. Different men rule us in the various departments of our lives. There may be one power behind the throne in politics, another in the manipulation of the federal discount rate, and still another in the dictation of next season's dances. If there were a national invisible cabinet ruling over our destinies, a thing which is not impossible to conceive of, it would work through certain group leaders on Tuesday for one purpose, through an entirely different set of... The idea of an invisible government is relative. We'll go back a sentence. If there were a national invisible cabinet ruling over our destinies, it would work through certain group leaders on Tuesday for one purpose and through an entirely different set on Wednesday for another. The idea of invisible government is relative. There may be a handful of men who control the educational methods of great majority of our schools. Yet, from another standpoint, every parent is a group leader with authority over his or her children. The invisible government tends to be concentrated in the hands of the few because of the expense of manipulating the social machinery which controls the opinions and habits of the masses. To advertise on a scale which will reach 50 million persons is expensive. Not anymore. One viral tweet. To reach and persuade the group leaders who dictate the public's thoughts and actions is likewise expensive. For this reason, there is an increasing tendency to concentrate the functions of propaganda in the hands of the propaganda specialist. This specialist is more and more assuming a distinct place and function in our national life. New activities call for new nomenclature. The propagandist who specializes in interpreting enterprises and ideas to the public and in interpreting the public to promulgators of new enterprises and ideas has come to be known by the name of Public Relations Counsel. The new profession of public relations has grown up because of the increasing complexity of modern life and the consequent necessity for making the actions of the part of the public understandable to the other sectors of the public. It is due to the increasing dependence of organized power of all sorts upon public opinion. Governments, whether they are monarchical, constitutional, democratic, or communist, depend upon acquiescent public opinion for the success of their efforts, and, in fact, government is only government by virtue of public acquiescence. Industries, public utilities, educational movements, indeed all groups representing any concept or product, whether they are majority or minority ideas, succeed only because of approving public opinion. Public opinion is the unacknowledged partner in all broad efforts. The Public Relations Council, then, is the agent who, working with the modern media of communication and the group formations of society, brings an idea to the consciousness of the public. But he is a great deal more than that. He is concerned with courses of action, doctrines, systems and opinions, and the securing of public support for them. He is also concerned with tangible things such as manufactured and raw products. He is concerned with public utilities, with large trade groups and associations representing entire industries. He functions primarily as an advisor to his client, very much as a lawyer does. A lawyer concentrates on the legal aspects of his client's business. A counsel on public relations concentrates on the public contacts of his client's business. Every phase of his client's ideas, products, or activities which may affect the public or in which the public may have an interest is part of his function. For instance, in the specific problems of the manufacturer, he examines the product, the markets, the way in which the public reacts to the product, the attitude of the employees to the public and towards the product, and the cooperation of the distribution agencies. The Council on Public Relations, after he has examined all these and other factors, endeavors to shape the actions of his client so that they will gain the interest, the approval, and the acceptance of the public. The means by which the public is apprised The means by which the public is apprised of the actions of his client are as varied as the means of communication themselves, such as conversation, letters, the stage, the motion picture, the radio, lecture platform, the magazine, the daily newspaper. The Council on Public Relations is not an advertising man. The Council on Public Relations is not an advertising man, but he advocates advertising where that is indicated. So he's like allocating advertising to the proper methods of communication. Yeah. His work and that of the advertising agency do not conflict with or duplicate each other. His first efforts are naturally devoted to analyzing his client's problems and making sure that what he has to offer the public is something something which the public accepts or can be brought to accept. He's pretty much saying, what's the likelihood that your idea is going to be adopted by the masses? It is futile to attempt to sell an idea or prepare the ground for a product that is basically unsound. Yeah, so it's pretty much giving someone of expertise the ability to say, hey, this isn't going to work. We shouldn't waste our money on this in the first place. For example, an orphan asylum is worried... Just got really quiet. For example, an orphan asylum is worried by a falling off in contributions and a puzzling attitude of indifference or hostility on the part of the public. The Council on Public Relations may discover upon analysis that the public, alive to modern sociological trends, subconsciously criticizes the institution because it is not organized on the new cottage plan. I'm assuming this is like, okay, if I can remember... cottage plan. I think that's like in the development of like orphanages, there was like a industrial like big plan, and then there was a cottage plan where they like put them out in the country where they are more homey rather than like shoved into fucking closets or whatever. That's my conception of it. He will advise modification of his client in this respect. Or a railroad may be urged to put on a fast train for the sake of the prestige with which it will lend to the road's name. And hence to stocks and bonds. Okay. A railroad may be urged to put on a fast train for the sake of the prestige which it will lend to the road's name, and hence to its stocks and bonds. So having a faster train on your rail, I guess. I don't even know. Like, railroads aren't a thing that I fucking know about nowadays. But what I'm assuming they're saying is having a fast train and it is advertised to the public as being like the fastest train will increase your company's stocks, because now your train is more likely to be known. Yeah. If the corset makers, for instance, wish to bring their product into fashion again, he would unquestionably advise that the plan was impossible, since women have definitely emancipated themselves from the old style corset. Yet his fashion advisors might report that women might be persuaded to adopt a certain type of girdle which eliminated the unhealthful features of the corset. His next effort is to analyze his public. He studies the groups which must be reached and the leaders through whom he may approach these groups. Social groups, economic groups, geographical groups, age groups, doctrinal groups. This is demographic analysis 101, essentially. Language groups, cultural groups, all of these represent the divisions through which, on behalf of his client, he may talk to the public. This is seriously like more of like an advertising chapter than a fucking propaganda chapter, but I guess they're similar. I guess they operate in a very similar way. Only after this double analysis has been made and the results collated has the time come for the next step, the formulation of policies governing the general practice, procedure, and habits of the client in all those aspects in which he comes in contact with the public. And only when these policies have been agreed upon is the time for the fourth step. The first recognition of the distinct functions of the Public Relations Council arose, perhaps, in the early years of the present century as a result of the insurance scandals coincident with the muckraking of corporate finance and other muckraking of the muckraking question mark. Of corporate finance, and the popular magazines. The interest thus attacked suddenly realized that they were completely out of touch with the public they were professing to serve, and required expert advice to show them how they could understand the public and interpret themselves to it. There's nobody here. What happened, everybody? I had a good stream last week. I guess this is what happens when I take 4 days off. Fucking A. Rippity doop. Fuck, I should have streamed yesterday. They were completely out of touch with the public they were professing to serve and required expert advice to show them how they could understand the public and interpret themselves to it. The Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, prompted by the most fundamental self-interest, initiated a conscious, direct effort to change the attitude of the public towards insurance companies in general. Yeah, this is another fucking problem that we're having right now. Public fucking interest in, or the fucking public's attitude towards insurance companies. Bro, everything, history repeats itself. Goddamn. I can't believe. Direct effort to change the attitude of the public towards insurance companies in general and toward itself in particular to its profit and the public's benefit. It tried to make a majority movement of itself by getting the public to buy its policies. It reached the public at every point of its corporate and separate existence. To communities, it gave health surveys and expert counsel. To individuals, it gave health creeds and advice. Even the building in which the corporation was located was made a picturesque landmark to see and remember. In other words, to carry on the associative process. And so this company came to have a broad general acceptance. The number and amount of its policies grew constantly as its broad contacts with society increased. Within a decade, many large corporations were employing public relations counsel under one title or another, for they had come to recognize that they depended upon public goodwill for their continued prosperity. It was no longer true that it was none of the public's business how the affairs of a corporation were managed. They were obliged to convince the public that they were conforming to its demands and as to honesty and fairness. A corporation might discover that its labor policy was causing public resentment and might introduce a more enlightened policy solely for the sake of general goodwill. Or a department store hunting for the cause of diminishing sales might discover that its clerks had a reputation for bad manners and initiate formal instruction in courtesy and tact. The public relations expert may be known as public relations director or counsel. Often he is called secretary or vice president or director. Sometimes he is known as cabinet officer or commissioner. By whatever title he may be called, his function is well defined, and his advice has definite bearing on the conduct of the group or individual with whom he is working. Many persons still believe that the public relations counsel is a propagandist and nothing else. But, on the contrary, the stage at which many suppose he starts his activities may actually be the stage at which he ends them. I don't know what that means. After the public and the client are thoroughly analyzed and the policies have been formulated, his work may be finished. Oh, okay. In other cases of the work of public relations counsel must be continuous to be effective. For in many instances, only by a careful system of constant, thorough, and frank information will the public understand and appreciate the value of what a merchant, educator, or statesman is doing. The Council on Public Relations must maintain constant vigilance because inadequate information or false information from unknown sources may have results of enormous importance. Yeah, I can't overstate how important fucking... Okay. The Council on Public Relations must maintain constant vigilance because inadequate information or false information from unknown sources may have results of enormous importance. A single false rumor at a critical moment may drive down the price of a corporation's stock, causing a loss of millions to stockholders. An air of secrecy or mystery about a corporation's financial dealings may breed a general suspicion capable of acting as an invisible drag on the company's whole dealings with the public. The Council on Public Relations must be in a position to deal effectively with rumor and suspicions, attempting to stop them at their source. How do we fix this for everybody at once? Like, counteracting them promptly with correct or more complete information through channels which will be most effective, or best of all, establishing such relations of confidence in the concern's integrity that rumors and suspicions will have no opportunity to take root. Yeah, but this is, dude, the internet makes this impossible. You can't quell disinformation. Like, what source? There's no source. Everyone's fucking anonymous. Twitter accounts aren't. Yeah, whatever. Or best of all, establishing such relations of confidence in the concern's integrity that rumors and suspicions will have no opportunity to take root. His function may include the discovery of new markets, the existence of which had been unsuspected. If we accept public relations as a profession, we must also expect it to have both ideals and ethics. The ideal of the profession is a pragmatic one. It is to make the producer, whether that producer be a legislature making laws or a manufacturer making a commercial product, understand what the public wants and to make the public understand the objectives of the producer. In relation to industry, the ideal of the profession is to eliminate the waste and the friction that result in when industry does things or makes things which its public does not want, or when the public does not understand what is being offered. For example, the telephone companies maintain extensive public relations departments to explain what they are doing so that energy may not be burned up in the friction of a misunderstanding. A detailed description, for example, of the immense and scientific care which the company takes to choose clearly understandable and distinguishable exchange names helps the public to appreciate the effort that is being made to give good service and stimulate it to cooperate by enunciating clearly. It aims to bring about an understanding between educators and educated, between government and people, between charitable institutions and contributors, between nation and nation. The profession of Public Relations Counsel is developing for itself an ethical code which compares favorably with that of governing the legal and medical professions. In part, this code is forced upon the Public Relations Counsel by the very conditions of his work, while recognizing, just as the lawyer does, that everyone has the right to present his case in its best light. He nevertheless refuses a client whom he believes to be dishonest, a product which he believes to be fraudulent, or a cause which he believes to be antisocial. One reason for this is that, even though a special pleader, he is not dissociated from the client in the public's mind. Another reason that while he is pleading before the court of public opinion, he is at the same time trying to affect the court's judgments and actions. In law, the judge and jury hold the deciding balance of power. In public opinion, the Public Relations Counsel is judge and jury, because through his pleading of a case, the public may accede to his opinion and judgment. He does not accept a client whose interests conflict with those of another client. He does not accept a client whose case he believes to be hopeless or those whose product he believes to be unmarketable. He should be candid in his dealings. It must be repeated that his business is not to fool or hoodwink the public. If he were to get such a reputation, this usefulness in his profession would be at an end. When he is sending out propaganda material, it is clearly labeled as to source. The editor knows from whom it comes and what its purpose is, and accepts or rejects it on its merits as news. The systematic study of mass psychology revealed to students the potentialities of invisible government of society. Sorry, fucking hell. The systematic study of mass psychology revealed to students the potentialities of invisible government of society by manipulation of the motives which actuate man in the group. Trotter and Laban, who approached the subject in a scientific manner, and Graham Wallace, Walter Lippmann, and others who continued with searching studies of the group mind, established that the group has mental characteristics distinct from those of the individual, and is motivated by impulses and emotions which cannot be explained on the basis of what we know of individual psychology. So the question naturally arose, if we understood the mechanisms and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing it? The recent practice of propaganda has proved that it is possible, at least up to a certain point and within certain limits. Mass psychology is as yet far from being an exact science, and the mysteries of human motivation are by no means all revealed. But at least theory and practice have combined with sufficient success to permit us to know that in certain cases we can effect some change in public opinion with a fair degree of accuracy by operating a certain mechanism, just as the motorist can regulate the speed of his car by manipulating the flow of gasoline. Propaganda is not a science in the laboratory sense, but it is no longer entirely the empirical affair that it was before the advent of the study of mass psychology. It is now scientific in the sense that it seeks to base its operations upon definite knowledge drawn from direct observation of the group mind, and upon the application of principles which have been demonstrated to be consistent and relatively constant. The modern propagandist studies systematically and objectively the material with which he is working, in the spirit of the laboratory. If the matter in hand is a nationwide sales campaign, he studies the field by means of a clipping service, or of a corps of scouts, or by personal study at a crucial spot. He determines, for example, which features of a product are losing their public appeal, and in what new direction the public taste is veering. He will not fail to investigate to what extent it is the wife who has the final word in the choice of her husband's car or of his suit and shirts. Scientific accuracy of results is not to be expected because many of the elements of the situation must always be beyond his control. He may know with a fair degree of certainty that under favorable circumstances, an international flight will produce a spirit of goodwill, making possible even the consummation of political programs. I don't know what that means. But he cannot be sure that some unexpected event will not overshadow this flight in the public interest, or that some other aviator may not do something more spectacular the day before. Even in his restricted field of public psychology, there must always be a wide margin of error. Propaganda, like economics and sociology, can never be an exact science for the reason that its subject matter, like theirs, deals with human beings. If you can influence the leaders, either with or without their conscious cooperation, you automatically influence the group which they sway. But men do not need to be actually gathered in a public meeting or in a street. But men do not need to be actually gathered together in a public meeting or in a street riot to be subject to the influences of mass psychology. Because man is by nature gregarious, he feels himself to be a member of a herd, even when he is alone in his room with the curtains drawn. His mind retains the patterns which have been stamped onto it by the group influences. A man sits in his office deciding what stocks to buy. He imagines, no doubt, that he is planning his purchases according to his own judgment. In actual fact, his judgment is a melange of impressions stamped on his mind by outside influences which unconsciously control his thought. He buys a certain railroad stock because it was in the headlines yesterday, and hence is the one which comes most prominently to his mind. Because he has a pleasant recollection of a good dinner. Fucking hell. Because he has a pleasant recollection of a good dinner on one of its fast trains, because it has a liberal labor policy, a reputation for honesty, because he has been told that J.P. Morgan owns some of its shares. Trotter and Laban concluded that the group mind does not think in the strict sense of the word. In place of thoughts, it has impulses, habits, and emotions. In making up its mind, its first impulse is usually to follow the example of a trusted leader. This is one of the most firmly established principles of mass psychology. It operates in establishing the rising or diminishing prestige of a summer resort, in causing a run on a bank or a panic on the stock exchange, in creating a bestseller or a box office success. But when the example of the leader is not at hand and the herd must think for itself, it does so by means of cliches, pat words, or images which stand for a whole group of ideas or experiences. Not many years ago, it was only necessary to tag a political candidate with the word interests. Not many years ago, it was only necessary to tag a political candidate with the word interest to stampede millions of people into voting against him, because anything is so associated with the interest seems necessarily corrupt. Recently, the word Bolshevik has performed a similar service for persons who wished to frighten the public away from a line of action. Yeah, okay. The playing upon an old cliche or manipulating a new one, the propagandist can sometimes swing a whole mass of group emotions. In Great Britain, during the war, the evacuation hospitals came in for a considerable amount of criticism because of the summary way in which they handled their wounded. It was assumed by the public that a hospital gives prolonged and conscientious attention to its patients. When the name was changed to evacuation posts, the critical reaction vanished. Okay. No one expected more than an adequate emergency treatment for an institution so named. The cliche hospital was indelibly associated in the public mind with a certain picture. To persuade the public to discriminate between one type of hospital and another, to dissociate the cliche from the picture it evoked, would have been an impossible task. Instead, a new cliche automatically conditioned the public's emotion towards these hospitals. Men are rarely aware of the real reasons which motivate their actions. A man may believe that he buys a motor car because, after careful study of the technical features of all makes on the market, he has concluded that this is the best. He is almost certainly fooling himself. He bought it, perhaps, because a friend whose financial acumen he respects bought one last week, or because his neighbor believed he was not able to afford a car of that class, or because its colors are those of his college fraternity. It is chiefly the psychologists of the school of Freud who have pointed out that many of the man's thoughts and actions are compensatory substitutes for desires which he has been obliged to suppress. A thing may be desired not for its intrinsic worth or usefulness, but because he has unconsciously come to see it as a symbol of something else, the desire for which he is ashamed to admit to himself. A man buying a car may think he wants it for purposes of locomotion, whereas the fact may be that he would really prefer not to be burdened with it and would rather walk for the sake of his health. He may really want it because it is a symbol of social position, an evidence of his success in business, or a means of pleasing his wife. This general principle that men are very largely actuated by motives which they conceal from themselves is as true of mass as of individual psychology. It is evident that the successful propagandist must understand the true motives and not be content to accept the reasons which men give for what they do. People don't know what they want. This is basic psychology, basic marketing, really. You have to tell them what they want. If you listen to them, they're going to tell you some shit that doesn't work. It is not sufficient to understand only the mechanical structure of society, the groupings and cleavages and loyalties. An engineer may know all about the cylinders and pistons of a locomotive, but unless he knows how steam behaves under pressure, he cannot make his engine run. Human desires are the steam which makes the social machine work. Only by understanding them can the propagandists control the vast, loose-jointed mechanism which is modern society. The old propagandist based his work on the mechanistic reaction psychology then in vogue in our colleges. The old propagandist based his work on the mechanistic reaction psychology, then in vogue in our colleges. This assumed that the human mind was merely an individual machine, a system of nerves and nerve centers, reacting with mechanical regularity to stimuli, like a helpless, will-less automaton. It was the special pleader's function to provide the stimulus which would cause the desired reaction in the individual purchaser. It was one of the doctrines of the reaction psychology that a certain stimulus, often repeated, would create a habit, or that the mere reiteration of an idea would create a conviction. Suppose the old type of salesmanship, acting for a meat packer, was seeking to increase the sale of bacon. It would reiterate innumerable times in full-page advertisements, eat more bacon, eat bacon because it is cheap, because it is good, because it gives you reserve energy. The newer salesmanship, understanding the group structure of society and principles of mass psychology, would first ask, who is it that influences the eating habits of the public? The answer obviously is the physicians. That's not the case anymore. The new salesman will then suggest to the answer obviously is the physicians. The new salesman will then suggest to physicians to say publicly that it is wholesome to eat bacon. He knows as a mathematical certainty that large numbers of persons will follow the advice of their doctors because he understands the psychological relation of dependence of the men upon their physicians. The old-fashioned propagandists, using almost exclusively the appeal of the printed word, tried to persuade the individual reader to buy a definite article immediately. This approach is exemplified in a type of advertisement which used to be considered ideal from the point of view of directness and effectiveness. You, perhaps with a finger pointing at the reader, buy O'Leary's rubber heels now. The advertiser sought by means of reiteration and emphasis directed upon the individual to break down or penetrate sales resistance. Although the appeal was aimed at 50 million persons, it was aimed at each as an individual. The new salesmanship has found it possible, by dealing with men in the mass through their group formations, to set up psychological and emotional currents which will work for him instead of assaulting sales resistance by direct attack. He's interested in removing sales resistance. He creates circumstances which will swing emotional currents so as to make for purchaser demand. If, for instance, I want to sell pianos, it is not sufficient to blanket the country with a direct appeal, such as you buy a Mozart piano now, it is cheap, the best artists use it, it will last for years. This sounds like a fucking Trump quote. The best artists use it. Fucking hell. The claims may all be true, but they are in direct conflict with the claims of other piano manufacturers. And in direct competition with the claims of a radio or a motor car, or each competing for a consumer's dollar. What are the true reasons why the purchaser is planning to spend his money on a new car instead of a new piano? Because he has decided that he wants the commodity called locomotion more than he wants the commodity called music. Not altogether. He buys a car because it is at the moment the group custom to buy cars. Yeah, true. Fuck. The modern propagandist therefore sets to work to create circumstances which will modify that custom. He appeals perhaps to the home instinct, which is fundamental. He will endeavor to develop a public acceptance of the idea of a music room in the home. This he may do, for example, by organizing an exhibition of period music rooms designed by well-known decorators who themselves exert an influence of the buying groups. He enhances the effectiveness and prestige of these groups by putting them in rare and valuable tapestries. Then, in order to create dramatic interest in the exhibit, he stages an event or ceremony. To this ceremony, key people, persons known to influence the buying habits of the public, such as a famous violinist, a popular artist, and a society leader, are all invited. These key persons affect other groups, lifting the idea of the music room to a place in the public consciousness which it did not have before. The juxtaposition of these leaders and the idea which they are dramatizing are then projected to the wider public through various publicity channels. Meanwhile, influential architects have been persuaded to make the music room an integral architectural part of their plans, with perhaps a specially charming niche in one corner for the piano. Less influential architects will, as a matter of course, imitate what is done by men whom they consider masters of their profession. They, in turn, will implant the idea of the music room in the mind of the general public. The music room will be accepted because it has been made the thing, and the man or woman who has a music room, or has arranged a corner of the parlor as a musical corner, will naturally think of buying a piano. It will come to him as his own idea. Fucking rip. Under the old salesmanship, the manufacturer said to the prospective purchaser, "Please buy a piano." The new salesman has reversed the process and caused the prospective purchaser to say to the manufacturer, "Please sell me a piano." The value of the associative process in the propaganda is shown in connection with a large real estate development. To emphasize that Jackson Heights was socially desirable, every attempt was made to produce the associative process. A benefit performance of jitney players was staged for the benefit of earthquake victims of Japan under the auspices of Mr. Astor and others. The social advantages of the place were projected. A golf course was laid out and a clubhouse planned. When the post office was opened, the Public Relations Council attempted to use it as a focus for national interest and discovered that its opening fell coincident with a date important in the annals of American Postal Service. This was then made the basis of the opening. When an attempt was made to show the public the beauty of the apartments, a competition was held among interior decorators for the best furnished apartment in Jackson Heights. An important committee of judges decided. This competition drew the approval of well-known authorities as well as the interest of millions, who were made cognizant of it through newspaper and magazine and other publicity, with the effect of building up definitely the prestige of the development. One of the most effective methods is the utilization of the group formation of modern society in order to spread ideas. An example of this is the nationwide competitions for sculpture in ivory soap. That was a thing? Open to school children in certain age groups as well as professional sculptors. A sculptor of national reputation found ivory soap an excellent medium for sculpture. The Procter and Gamble Company offered a series of prizes for the best sculpture in white soap. The contest was held under the auspices of the Art Center in New York City, an organization of high standing in the art world. School superintendents and teachers throughout the country were glad to encourage the movement as an educational aid for schools. Practice among school children as part of their art courses was stimulated. Contests were held between schools, between school districts, and between cities. Ivory soap was adaptable for sculpting in the homes because mothers saved the shavings and the imperfect efforts for laundry purposes. The work itself was clean. The best pieces are selected from the local competitions for entry in the national contest. This is held annually at an important art gallery in New York, whose prestige, with that of the distinguished judges, establishes the contest as a serious art event. In the first of these national competitions, about 500 pieces of sculpture were entered. In the third, 2,500, and the fourth, more than 4,000. If the carefully selected pieces were so numerous, it is evident that a vast number were sculpted during the year, and that number and that a much greater number must have been made for practice purposes. The goodwill was greatly enhanced by the fact that this soap had not merely the concern of the housewife, but also a matter of personal and intimate interest to her children. Just manufacturing a reason to sell soap, I guess. That's the whole point of that. Ugh. How much more in this chapter? Just one more page after this. A number of familiar psychological motives were set in motion in the carrying out of this campaign. The aesthetic, the competitive, the gregarious, the snobbish, the exhibitionist, and last but by no means least, the maternal. All these motives and group habits were put in concerted motion by the simple machinery of group leadership and authority. As if actuated by the pressure of a button, people began working for the client for the sake of the gratification obtained in the sculpture work itself. This point is most important in successful propaganda work. The leaders who lend their authority to any propaganda campaign will do so only if it can be made to touch their own interests. There must be a disinterested aspect of the propagandist activities. In other words, it is one of the functions of the Public Relations Council to discover at what points his client's interests coincide with those of other individuals or groups. In the case of the soap sculpture competition, the distinguished artists and educators who sponsored the idea were glad to lend their services and their names because the competitions really promoted an interest which they had at heart, the cultivation of aesthetic impulse among the younger generation. Such coincidence and overlapping of interests is as infinite as the interlacing of group formations themselves. For example, a railway wishes to develop its business. The Council on Public Relations makes a survey to discover at what points its interests coincide with those of its prospective customers. The company then establishes relations with chambers of commerce along its right of way and assists them in developing their communities. It helps them to secure new plants and industries for the town. It facilitates business through the dissemination of technical information. It is not merely a case of bestowing favors in the hope of receiving favors. These activities of the railroad, besides creating goodwill, actually promote growth on its right of way. The interests of the railroad and the communities through which it passes mutually interact and feed one another. In the same way, a bank institutes an investment service for the benefit of its customers in order that the latter may have more money to deposit with the bank. Or a jewelry concern develops an insurance department to insure the jewels it sells in order to make the purchaser feel greater security in buying jewels. Or a baking company establishes an information service suggesting recipes for bread to encourage new uses for bread in the home. New uses for bread? Jesus. The ideas of the new propaganda are predicated on the sound psychology based on enlightened self-interest. I have tried, in these chapters, to explain the place of propaganda in modern American life and something of the methods by which it operates to tell the why, the what, and the who, and the how of the invisible government which dictates our thoughts, directs our feelings, and controls our actions. In the following chapters, I shall try to show how propaganda functions in specific departments of group activity, to suggest some of the further ways which it may operate. Alright, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Please hit like, subscribe, and catch me on the flip-flop later.